My dear friend, stop and take a deep breath. Please don't scroll past this video, because what you're about to hear, this might be the word you've been waiting on. Not from me, but from God. Brought through a message, yes, but designed for this moment. Tailored for your heart. And it's not by chance you're here. This moment, it's been appointed. I know, life hasn't always made sense lately. Maybe the weight's gotten heavier. The prayers, quieter. The faith, shaken. You've endured. You've shown up. But somewhere in all of it, you've been left wondering, when does what I believe start becoming what I see? This message is your answer. You're about to step into a deeper understanding of the shift from wanting to having. Not because you wished harder, not because you worked longer, but because your spirit is aligning with what God already prepared for you. This isn't just about your mindset, it's about your being. A spiritual recalibration, a divine realignment. And once you get this, once it clicks deep down in your soul, things will start moving fast. What once felt out of reach will begin showing up, because you're not chasing anymore. You're receiving. Now, before we go deeper, take a moment. Honor this moment. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't yet. We're building something sacred here. And drop the number 777 in the comments. That number isn't random. It's a spiritual signal, a declaration, a way of saying, I'm ready, God. Just like the walls of Jericho fell when the people moved together in faith. Your simple act of faith here could be the symbol that moves heaven in your favor. So if this resonates, stay. Don't just hear it, receive it. Let's begin. Desire. Now that's a word that carries weight. Not just the kind of want that comes and goes with the wind. Not just a passing craving or a whim you forget by lunchtime. I'm talking about the kind of desire that sinks deep into your bones. That lingers in the silence of the night. That whispers to you when nobody else is listening. That kind of desire. That's not weakness. That's not desperation. That is divine. See, when you've walked through some life, when you've seen some years, carried burdens, watched dreams come close only to slip through your fingers, you begin to recognize that desire, real desire, is not a flaw in your character. It's not a lack of gratitude. It's not something to feel ashamed of. No, sir. Desire is a signal, a divine signal. It's a call from above, letting you know there's more. It's a holy stirring, a sacred tug on your spirit telling you that what you see now is not the end of your story. When you feel desire that won't let go, that longing for peace, for love, for abundance, for purpose, it's not there by accident. That's not something you just picked up from scrolling online or listening to the latest self-help podcast. That desire was planted, sown into your spirit by the Creator Himself. It's like a holy echo, bouncing between heaven and your soul, reminding you that there's a destination up ahead. You're not where you started, but you're not done yet either. You're in between. And that in between, that's sacred ground. That's the sacred gap. There's a space between where you are and where God is calling you to be. And in that space lives desire. That space isn't meant to punish you. It's not there to tease you or keep you chasing shadows. It's there to awaken you, to call something higher out of you. Desire points to the vision God has placed within you. It's evidence that there's more. not in a greedy way, but in a godly way. Because you were never meant to stay stagnant. You were meant to grow, to stretch, to become. But here's where it gets deep. Desire doesn't just show you where you're going. It often brings you into alignment with the one who's already mapped out the path. That gap between here and there, that longing you feel in your soul, that's not something to avoid or deny. That's something to lean into with reverence. That's the space where transformation begins. That's the holy tension that brings you to your knees, not in despair, but in surrender. Take a look at the story of Hannah from the book of 1 Samuel. Now that's a woman who knew desire. She wasn't casual about it, wasn't afraid to feel it, and she surely didn't pretend it wasn't there. Her desire ran deep. She longed for a child with every fiber of her being, and she brought that longing to God. Not once, not halfway, but fully, with tears and trembling lips and a heart wide open. She didn't suppress the desire. She didn't shame herself for wanting more. She prayed it. She poured it out like an offering. She wept, she begged, and she vowed. That's what desire does when you let it lead you toward God instead of away from Him. It becomes a bridge. It becomes a vow. It becomes the beginning of covenant. Hannah's longing was the key that unlocked a divine agreement. Her prayer wasn't just a personal plea, it was a sacred alignment. And out of that alignment came Samuel, one of the greatest prophets in Scripture. Her desire brought forth purpose. It ushered in destiny. It wasn't just about her womb, it was about God's plan. So let me ask you, what is your desire trying to awaken in you? What if your deepest yearning is not an absence, but a signpost? What if that ache in your chest is a sacred invitation? What if God is using that longing to draw you into something greater than you've imagined? Something beyond what you can see from where you stand? Because here's the truth. Not every desire is rooted in ego. Not every longing is selfish. Sometimes, the most relentless desires, the ones that won't let you sleep, the ones that catch you in quiet moments and remind you what still matters, they are God speaking, whispering, calling, saying, "Come closer, there's more, trust me." And yes, I get it. Desire can hurt. It can burn. It can frustrate you when what you want feels so far away. You might look around and think, why haven't I seen it yet? Why am I still waiting? But even that frustration, that ache, it's not just emotional. It's spiritual. It means you know in your spirit that there's something greater meant for you. It's a confirmation that what you want isn't random. It's aligned. It's rooted in your calling. That's why desire is not a weakness. It's an awakening. But it's how you respond to that desire that makes all the difference. Because desire, left unmanaged, can turn into bitterness. It can harden the heart if you start believing the lie that just because it hasn't happened yet, it never will. That's not faith. That's fear disguised as realism. And fear has no place in the heart of someone who walks with God. Hannah didn't let her delay become her defeat. She didn't let unanswered prayers become unanswered faith. She let her desire drive her into God's presence, not away from it. That's the invitation on the table for you right now. Not to push down your desires, not to pretend you don't care, but to bring them fully, honestly, humbly into God's hands. And here's something you need to know. Your desire might be bigger than you. It might not just be about you getting what you want. It might be about God getting what He needs through you. Your longing might be the first spark of something that will bless generations to come. You may be carrying a dream that's meant to break chains, open doors, shift legacies. That's why the desire feels so strong, because the purpose behind it is greater than what you can see. Now let's pause and breathe for a moment, because I want to speak directly to your heart, the part of you that's been waiting quietly, holding hope in secret. Could your desire be a spiritual invitation? Is it possible that what you've been calling a delay is really God's divine setup? What if that restlessness in your soul is holy ground? And if it is, how will you answer? Will you deny the desire because it hasn't arrived on your timeline? Or will you embrace it, hold it like a sacred flame, protect it, pray over it, water it with faith until it blossoms into something beautiful? You see, the enemy would love for you to believe that desire is dangerous, that it only leads to disappointment. But God sees it differently. He sees it as a sign of life, a sign that you're still expecting, still believing, still open to receiving what He has for you. And here's what I want you to understand. If that desire is rooted in truth, in purpose, in alignment with the life God's calling you to live, it will not go unanswered. It may not come in the way you imagined. It may not come when you thought it would. But if it's of Him, it will come. Because our God doesn't plant seeds without the intention to bring harvest. So stand firm, chosen one. Let your desire speak. Let it drive you to your knees, not out of desperation, but out of deep trust. Let it remind you that you were made for more. That the gap between where you are and where you're going is filled with grace, preparation, and transformation. Your desire is not a curse. It's not a punishment. It's not a sign you failed. It's a holy compass pointing you to the next chapter. And when you stop fearing it, when you stop trying to manage it or mute it, and instead honor it, bring it into the light, speak it aloud in faith, and trust that it was given to you for a reason, that's when you begin to see what's possible. That's when you move from simply wanting to preparing, from hoping to expecting, from dreaming to becoming. So I'll leave you with this, not as a preacher on a stage, but as a brother who's walked through some long roads, who knows what it means to carry unfulfilled prayers and still stand tall. Hold your desire close, not as proof of what's missing, but as a sign of what's on the way. God's not done, not even close. Keep moving, keep trusting, keep listening, because that desire, that fire inside you, it's not going to burn you up. It's going to light the path. Now, let's lean in a little deeper, because desire on its own is only the beginning. It's a spark, yes. It's sacred, yes. But just like a flame, if it's not nurtured the right way, if it's not honored and directed, it can either light your path or burn you out. See, this is where many people, good people, believing people, find themselves stuck. They feel the desire, they pray the prayers, they carry hope in their hearts, but somewhere along the way, the fire dims. Not because the desire was wrong, but because their approach to that desire stayed rooted in wanting. And that, chosen ones, is where the cycle begins. There's a quiet danger in staying in the space of want. When you stay in that mindset too long without allowing faith to transform it, you start to reinforce the very thing you're trying to escape. Wanting, if it's not elevated by trust, begins to echo lack. And when all you say, all you think, all you feel is, "I want," you are constantly affirming the distance between where you are and where you long to be. You're unintentionally telling yourself, and more importantly, telling the atmosphere around you, that what you need is still beyond your reach, that you're still waiting, still empty, still unsure. And that energy, it doesn't just sit quietly, it ripples outward. It shapes your posture, your prayers, your presence. Now hear me. This isn't about shame. It's not about guilt. Wanting in and of itself is not the problem. The problem is when we stay stuck there, when our language never evolves, when our hearts never shift, when our spirits remain anchored in a sense of separation from the very thing God has already placed in motion. The longer you dwell in "I want," the more you train your mind and your spirit to see the gap rather than the promise. But God's word speaks something different, something higher, something more rooted in truth than in emotion. In Matthew 6:8, Jesus reminds us that your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Just sit with that for a moment. Before the words even leave your lips, before the ache even reaches its peak, before you ever put language to your longing, He already knows. He already sees. He's not waiting for you to convince Him. He's waiting for you to trust Him. And that trust, that's the shift. Because faith doesn't live in the same house as lack. Faith doesn't echo, "I want." Faith says, "I believe." It says, "I've already received." And if you really want to see desire turn into reality, that's the path you must walk. Not the path of constantly chasing, but the path of confident receiving. Mark 11:24 lays it out in no uncertain terms. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. That's not metaphor. That's not suggestion. That's instruction. Divine instruction. And it comes with a promise. But how do we get there? How do we move from wanting to having? When everything around us, everything in the natural world, keeps reminding us of what we don't yet have, it starts with what's happening inside. It begins with a shift in your spirit, a choice to stop measuring your faith by what you see and start anchoring it in what you know. That's what trust is. It's the unwavering conviction that, even if it hasn't shown up in your life yet, it's already been spoken in heaven. It's already being prepared. It's already unfolding. See, many folks pray from a place of distance. They pray with a tone that says, "Lord, if you could maybe," or "God, if it's not too much," as though they're speaking to a God who's far away, reluctant, unsure about blessing them. But that's not who He is. That's not His nature. He's not holding back. He's not trying to test your patience for fun. He's waiting for you to shift out of begging and into believing. There's a big difference. Faith doesn't plead, it prepares. Faith doesn't just ask, it aligns. It shifts your posture from that of a seeker to that of a receiver. And when that alignment takes place, you begin to walk differently, speak differently, expect differently. Not because you're pretending, not because you're faking it, but because you've made peace with the truth that what's yours is on the way. It's already set aside. Your role is to receive it with confidence, not with uncertainty. But that can only happen if you let go of the mindset of lack. That mindset, subtle as it may be, will whisper lies to you. Lies that tell you you're not enough, that you've missed your chance, that God must have overlooked your request or blessed someone else instead. That mindset will convince you that the delay is denial. And if you're not careful, you'll start agreeing with it. You'll start shrinking your prayers, tempering your hopes, and protecting your heart from disappointment instead of opening it in faith. And here's the truth, plain and simple. You can't manifest what you don't believe you already carry. If you keep saying, "I want, I need, I'm waiting," then you're reinforcing the lie that it's not already yours. But if you can begin to say, "Thank you, Lord, for what you're already bringing into my life," if you can begin to live like it's on the way, if you can begin to believe that the prayer has been heard and the answer is in motion, that's when you make the shift. That's when heaven starts moving on your behalf. You see, this isn't about positive thinking. This is about spiritual authority. It's about speaking what aligns with God's promises rather than your present fears. It's about stepping into a higher frequency, a divine rhythm, where faith leads and feelings follow. It's about declaring that you are not waiting for the world to give you permission. You've already received divine confirmation. That's the kind of shift that breaks the cycle. That's the kind of shift that changes everything. And don't get me wrong, this isn't easy, especially when time keeps ticking and nothing seems to change. When you've prayed the same prayer 100 times and still feel the silence on the other end. When the bills are due, the relationship is strained. The diagnosis hasn't improved. That's when it's hardest. That's when the temptation to give up becomes loud. But that's also when your faith matters most, because that's when you're closest to breakthrough. That's when the shift from wanting to having becomes more than theory. It becomes your lifeline. You were never meant to stay stuck in longing. You were never meant to live in a permanent state of pursuit. That's not how God designed you. You are a co-heir with Christ, not a beggar at the gate. You are not empty. You are not forgotten. You are already full of the promises God has spoken over your life. And your job now is to walk like it, speak like it, believe like it. So let me ask you, how do you talk about your desires? Are your words saturated with someday, or are they rooted in already? Are your prayers filled with fear and desperation? Or are they charged with gratitude and certainty? Because the language you speak reflects the belief you carry, and belief is everything in this journey. It's time to shift, chosen one. Time to shift from begging to thanking, from doubting to trusting, from asking if to declaring when. That's how you close the gap. That's how you approach desire, not as a reminder of what's missing, but as a signal of what's already moving toward you. Let your faith speak louder than your fear. Let your trust be greater than your timeline. God's not slow, He's precise. He's not distant. He's intentional. And right now, He's asking you to come higher, to rise above the mindset of lack and plant yourself in the soil of trust, because only then will your desire bear fruit. Only then will what's been spoken in heaven manifest here on earth. The shift is simple, but it's powerful. From desiring to trusting. That's the way forward. That's how you receive what's already yours. Let me ask you something. What if the reason your breakthrough hasn't come yet isn't because God is withholding it, but because you're still waiting for it, instead of preparing for it? What if the very thing you've been longing for is standing just outside the door, but the door hasn't opened because you haven't yet stepped into the role required to receive it? That's a question worth sitting with, because there comes a moment, sooner or later, in every faith journey when longing is no longer enough. Prayer is still essential, yes, but it must evolve. At some point, desire has to grow up into partnership, and that's where the shift happens. from passive hoping to active co-creating. You know, you weren't created to live your whole life in longing. God didn't design you to simply wish, wait, and wonder. You're not here to circle the same mountain year after year with the same prayer on your lips and the same unanswered ache in your heart. My dear friend, you were meant to move, to grow, to build, to participate in the very manifestation of the thing God has already spoken over your life. Longing, when it's holy, brings you to the place of surrender. But faith, real, grown-up, mature faith, takes you further. It says, I won't just wait, I'll prepare. There's a difference. Waiting is passive. It holds its breath and watches the sky. But preparation is an act of belief. It is faith with hands and feet. It is a declaration to the universe and to your own soul that what you've been asking for is not only possible, it's on its way. That kind of posture doesn't come from desperation. It comes from trust. It doesn't rush God's timing, but it honors God's promise by getting ready in advance. And if you want a clear picture of what that looks like in the Word, look no further than the prophet Elijah. The land was dry. No rain for years. People were desperate, parched, losing hope. And Elijah, a man rooted in divine confidence, prayed for rain. But he didn't stop there. He didn't just fold his hands and sit in silence. He moved. He acted. He turned to his servant and said, Go, look toward the sea. Not once, not twice, but 7 times. Over and over he sent that servant out, expecting rain to show itself. Now think about that. Elijah didn't see any clouds. There was no thunder, no wind, no visible change in the sky. But he believed, without evidence, that God would do what he said. And so he behaved like it was already done. He lived out the answer before it arrived. And that, right there, is the essence of co-creation. It's walking in the direction of your promise, even when your natural eyes don't see it yet. That's the kind of movement God is calling you into. That's the shift from longing to living, from delay to demonstration. He's not asking you to force the outcome. He's asking you to partner with the outcome. You don't control the rain, but you can build the field. You don't dictate the timing, but you can prepare the soil. You can start living as if the very thing you've prayed for is already on the way. Because here's what too many overlook. Staying in longing can become a form of spiritual avoidance. It feels safe. It feels humble. But sometimes, that humility masks a fear of disappointment. We tell ourselves we're just waiting on God. But deep down, we're afraid to move, afraid to prepare, afraid to hope that boldly. And so we stay still, silent, stuck. But beloved, faith was never meant to leave you in a holding pattern. Faith is forward motion. It's an invitation to step into your divine authority. It's not just about asking, it's about aligning. You see, when you move in expectation, you shift the atmosphere around you. You don't just prepare the outer world, you prepare the inner one. Your mindset starts to change. Your words take on a new tone. Your heart opens in a new way. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and start living in the promise that's already unfolding. And it's in that space, in that sacred, active, faithful space, that miracles begin to take form. Because let's tell the truth, the blessings we ask for often require a version of us we haven't become yet. The relationships, the opportunities, the abundance, the peace, they don't just fall into our laps. They come to those who are ready to receive them. And readiness isn't a matter of luck or chance. It's a matter of alignment. It's the result of consistent, faithful steps taken in the direction of God's voice. That's what it means to be a co-creator. Not that you're replacing God, not at all, but that you're walking in step with Him. You're participating in the unfolding. You're preparing space in your life for what you know is coming. You're saying, I trust you enough to act like it's already done. And don't let the simplicity of that fool you. That act of preparation is powerful. It's a statement of identity. It says, I know who I am. I know what's been promised. And I know that heaven is already moving on my behalf. That kind of faith draws provision. It attracts opportunity. It unlocks doors you didn't even know existed. Not because you're chasing things, but because you're ready for them. But you have to make the shift. You have to move from the sidelines of your own story and take your place on the field. God's not going to drag you into destiny. He's going to invite you. And the way you respond to that invitation says everything about what you believe. Do you believe your breakthrough is real? Do you believe the promise still stands? Do you believe the waiting wasn't wasted? That the prayer wasn't in vain? Then act like it. Speak like it. Walk like it. Live like it. Build the ark before the rain. Clear the room before the healing. Set the table before the feast. Move in faith, not because you see it, but because you believe it's already yours. That's not fantasy. That's scripture. That's the kind of faith that made Elijah call down rain. That's the kind of trust that made Joshua march around Jericho. That's the kind of authority that made Abraham prepare for fatherhood when there was no child in sight. They didn't just pray. They moved. They co-created with God. And now it's your turn. No more passive waiting. No more holding your breath, hoping something shifts on its own. This is your moment to step into divine partnership, to stop seeing yourself as someone in lack and start seeing yourself as someone in alignment. You've been given the authority. You've been given the promise. Now it's time to walk in it. Start speaking the language of completion. Start thanking God for what's already unfolding. Start making room in your life for what you asked for. Because the moment you do, you're not just hoping for a better future. You're building it. This is the call. To prepare, not just pray. To believe, not just beg. To act as if the rain is already on the horizon, even if the sky is still blue. To walk to the edge of the sea and look, not once, not twice, but until you see the cloud rising, no matter how small. Because once you make that shift, once you step into that role, everything begins to move. Not just around you, but within you. You are not here to wish. You are here to create. You are not here to plead. You are here to prepare. You are not here to live in lack. You are here to align with overflow. So take your place, chosen one. Step into the role. You were never meant to live life on pause. The promise is real. The door is ready. All that's left is for you to walk through it. I'd like to continue to ask you another question, but more real. What if your breakthrough isn't waiting for more effort, more hustle, or even more prayer, but simply a different energy? Not louder faith, not faster action, but a deeper shift within. A shift in the way you carry yourself, in the way you speak, in the way you show up before anything around you has changed. What if the key to crossing that invisible threshold from waiting to receiving from hoping to holding is not about doing more, but about being different. See, this shift from wanting to having is not about pretending. It's not about putting on a show for the world or trying to convince yourself with surface-level affirmations. This isn't about fake it till you make it. No, it's much more sacred than that. It's an inner transformation, a quiet but powerful recalibration of your entire being. It starts in your spirit and ripples into your thoughts, your language, your posture, your decisions. You begin to live from the inside out, not the outside in. You stop reacting to circumstances and start responding to truth. God's truth. And what is that truth? That you are already aligned with the very thing you've been asking for, that what you seek is already seeking you, that the door you've been praying to open has already been built, already been assigned to you, already been set in motion. You just have to meet it with the right energy. And energy, chosen one, doesn't lie. You can say the right words, repeat the right scriptures, go through all the motions. But if your energy is still rooted in lack, if your soul is still echoing, "I don't have it yet," then that vibration tells the truth before your mouth ever does. This is why the shift matters. Because wanting, when held too long, becomes a signal of distance. It speaks to the universe and says, "It's not here. It's still out there. I'm still waiting." And the universe, always responding to energy, mirrors that frequency right back to you. You end up staying in a loop where desire never transforms into experience because the signal you're sending out is misaligned with the result you want. But when you shift into the energy of having, truly having, you create a new magnetic pull in your life. You begin to align with the outcome, not the absence. You start to embody the emotion of fulfillment before the evidence arrives. And that's what changes everything. Because this isn't just about thinking differently. It's about feeling differently, speaking differently, walking differently. It's about living as though the blessing is already in your hands, even while it's still on the way. And make no mistake, this is not delusion. This is spiritual alignment. It's the evidence of true faith. Hebrews 11:1 tells us clearly, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Not the wish, not the theory. The substance, the evidence. That means there's a way of being, a way of moving, a way of believing that becomes more real than the current reality. That's the ground faith walks on. You're not just waiting for something to appear, you're standing on the unseen with such conviction that it starts to manifest around you. Not because you forced it, but because you became it. You matched the frequency of what you asked for. And that's when things begin to shift, not only externally, but deeply and permanently within you. Take a look at Abraham. God gave him a promise that seemed, by all natural standards, impossible. He was old. His wife was barren. The future didn't seem to hold much. But God spoke, and Abraham believed. Not casually, not occasionally. He believed, so much so that he began to live as though the promise had already been fulfilled. Romans 4:17 describes this beautifully. God, who gives life to the dead and calls into being things that were not. Abraham's faith wasn't based on what he could see. It wasn't conditional on immediate results. It rested on the character of God and the power of a promise. That's the energy of having, and that's the energy you're being invited into right now. Because when you shift into having, it doesn't mean you ignore reality. It means you no longer let reality limit your expectation. You stop asking, "When will it come?" and start saying, "It's already mine. and I'm ready to receive it. That changes the way you wake up in the morning. It changes the way you talk about your future. It changes the way you treat yourself and others. You begin to carry the weight of promise with grace. You move with quiet assurance. You don't have to prove anything to anyone because the knowing is enough. The peace is proof. Let's be clear. This isn't about performance. It's not about manipulating God into action. This is about alignment, co-creation, resonance. It's about speaking the language of faith until your body, your mind, your environment begins to echo it back. You begin to notice opportunities where you used to see obstacles. You begin to receive confirmation in small, quiet moments that you're on the right track. The more you walk in this vibration, the more life opens up to meet you there. But this shift must begin with intention. You don't stumble into the energy of having. You choose it. You cultivate it. You nurture it like a sacred fire. And it starts with your thoughts. Every time your mind says, "I'm still waiting," you gently guide it toward, "I'm being prepared." When your heart whispers, "It hasn't happened yet," you answer back, "But it's already done." That's not denial. That's dominion. From there, your language begins to change. You no longer speak about your desires as distant dreams. You speak as someone who's walking in fulfillment. You thank God, not just in advance, but in confidence. You declare your readiness, not in desperation, but in deep-rooted trust. Every word you speak becomes a seed planted in the soil of faith, and with every declaration, you draw your desires closer, and your actions begin to follow. You start showing up in ways that match your prayers. You organize your life around the blessing you know is coming. You make space for it. You prepare the room. You position your heart. That's what faith in action looks like. Not anxious striving, not fearful control, but steady alignment with what you know is already yours in the Spirit. And when your thoughts, your words, your emotions, and your actions all begin to line up, that's when momentum builds. That's when spiritual power flows freely. That's when the external begins to catch up to the internal. Because energy doesn't lie. And the universe, created and sustained by the same God who planted your desire in the first place, responds not to what you say once, but to what you consistently embody. So take a moment and ask yourself, what energy am I living in? Is it rooted in lack, in waiting, in wondering? Or is it grounded in trust, in fullness, in having? You'll know by the way you feel. You'll know by the peace in your heart. Because when you truly shift into the energy of having, something inside you settles. The striving quiets. The fear loosens its grip. You begin to walk lighter, think clearer, love deeper. You become a magnet for everything that's aligned with your highest purpose. That's the power of the energetic shift. It's not forced, it's not rushed, it's sacred, and it's available to you. Not someday, but right now. You don't need to wait for circumstances to change. You don't need permission to feel blessed. You don't need to see results before you align with truth. You have the authority to shift the atmosphere around you by shifting the frequency within you, letting your energy speak before your words do. Imagine this. You're standing before a door that leads to everything you've been praying for: peace, abundance, healing, love, clarity. And the door isn't locked. It's not sealed shut. But it's not open either. It's waiting for something in you to shift. You reach for the handle, you knock, you pray, but nothing moves. And so you begin to wonder if maybe you're not ready, or worse, maybe the door was never meant for you. But here's what you may not realize. Sometimes, it's not the door that's holding things back. It's the energy you bring to it. See, wanting is like standing in front of that door and saying, "I don't have it," over and over again. Wanting, when it becomes a permanent state of mind, starts to whisper lack into every area of your life. It keeps your focus on what's not there. It reminds you of the distance, not the destination. And even though you may be reaching for something holy, the energy behind the reach is what the universe hears. It hears your fear, your doubt, your need, and it mirrors it. Not to punish you, but to show you where you're truly aligned. And if you stay in that space too long, wanting becomes more than a desire. It becomes a barrier, a silent wall that says, "This is missing." And the world reflects that echo right back to you. But what if you didn't speak from the absence anymore? What if you shifted the way you looked at the gap? Because you see, that gap between your current reality and the life you're believing for, it isn't empty. It's filled with potential, with divine orchestration, with preparation, and above all, with opportunity. The opportunity to change your posture from longing to gratitude. Gratitude now, that's the key that turns the handle. Gratitude doesn't say, "I'm still waiting." Gratitude says, "I know it's already working." It shifts your energy from need to knowing, from desperation to trust. It doesn't require evidence in your bank account, in your relationships, in your health. Gratitude is about spiritual sight, believing the promise before the proof. It's about acknowledging that the blessing already belongs to you, even if it hasn't arrived on your doorstep. And we see this clearly in Scripture, over and over. But one moment stands out with a clarity we can't ignore. In Exodus 16, the Israelites had been delivered from slavery, freed from Egypt, but their journey wasn't over. They found themselves in the wilderness, hungry, tired, unsure. And instead of giving thanks for their deliverance, they fell into the trap of complaining. Their minds were still chained to lack, even though their bodies were free. They focused on what they didn't have, and that mindset nearly cost them the provision God was ready to give. But God, in His mercy, still sent manna, bread from heaven, not just once, but daily. But look closely, because the lesson isn't just in the miracle. It's in the instruction. He told them to gather just enough for each day, not to hoard, not to worry, just trust. He was teaching them a rhythm of dependence, a mindset of faith. He was calling them to shift from fear of not having to confidence that every need would be met exactly when it was supposed to. That's the same mindset God is calling you into now, because what you focus on expands. If you keep waking up and seeing lack, speaking lack, expecting lack, that's exactly what will fill your days. But if you begin each day with a spirit of gratitude, if you speak from a place of already having, if you thank God not just for what is, but for what's becoming, that's when things start to move. Not just around you, but within you. And that inner shift, that's what makes all the difference. Because when the mindset changes, the language changes. And when the language changes, the energy shifts. You start saying things like, "I'm ready for what's next," instead of, "Why hasn't it come yet?" You begin to feel joy. Not because everything looks perfect, but because you know something greater is unfolding, even in the silence. That joy, that peace, that sense of settled expectation, that's the evidence that you've made the shift. But how do you begin to shift practically? It starts with becoming aware, truly aware of the thoughts you think and the words you speak. Each time you catch yourself saying, "I wish," or "I need," or "I don't have," take a breath. Pause, reframe. Speak from the outcome, not the obstacle. Say, "Thank you, God, that it's already working out. Thank you that my answer is already in motion." Even if the situation hasn't changed on the outside, your spirit has just claimed a higher ground. Next comes emotional alignment. And this, chosen one, is powerful because your emotions carry a frequency. Gratitude, peace, joy, trust. These emotions vibrate at the same level as abundance. They make you magnetic to what you've been praying for. When you feel as if the blessing has already arrived, you're not faking anything. You're aligning your soul with what's already yours in the spirit. And this is where visualization comes into play, not just as a daydream, but as a spiritual discipline. Take time each day to see it, not just with your mind, but with your heart. See yourself walking in the home, sitting in the meeting, holding the hand, living in the answer, and most importantly, feel it. Don't wait for the moment to arrive to access the feeling. Call that feeling into your present moment. Feel the joy, feel the relief, feel the gratitude. Because when you do, you're creating a new reality within. And the outer world has no choice but to eventually catch up. But here's what's crucial. Don't do this with clenched fists. Don't visualize from a place of grasping. Let it be soft. Let it be open. Let it be rooted in trust, not in urgency. You're not trying to force anything into place. You're allowing what's already yours to rise to the surface. That's the difference between spiritual manipulation and spiritual surrender. And it continues with the way you speak, not just to others, but to yourself. Every time you open your mouth, you are either affirming abundance or reinforcing lack. So speak with intention, speak with authority, speak from the place of the answered prayer, not the unanswered one. Instead of saying, "I hope it works out," say, "I trust that it is." Instead of saying, "I'm waiting on it," say, "I'm walking toward it." That may seem subtle, but the spiritual world listens closely, and your words become the building blocks of your experience. This is how the mindset shift takes root, slowly, steadily, faithfully, until one day the old way of thinking no longer fits. Until one day you find yourself smiling in the middle of the wait, because you no longer feel separated from what you desire. You feel connected to it, and that connection is enough to carry you with peace, while the manifestation catches up. Because let's be honest, there will be moments when it still looks like nothing is changing. There will be days when the evidence is scarce, but those are the moments that reveal how deeply the shift has settled. Those are the moments that test whether your mindset is grounded in circumstances or in truth. When you can stand in lack and still say, "I am full." When you can face delay and still feel joy. When you can hear silence and still believe. You've stepped into the mindset that births miracles. And that, chosen one, is where God meets you. Not in the noise, not in the panic, but in the stillness of a renewed mind. A mind that's no longer governed by fear, but led by faith. A mind that no longer waits for the world to affirm your worth, but is already anchored in the knowledge that you are deeply seen, fully loved, and perfectly positioned. So take a breath, take a moment, and start today, not with another plea, but with a posture. a posture of gratitude, a posture of having, a posture of peace. Let your thoughts rise to meet your spirit. Let your emotions settle into trust. Let your words shape a new atmosphere. You're not chasing anything. You're not striving to become something. You're returning to who you already are. Someone chosen, someone blessed, someone ready. That's the mindset. That's the shift. And once you make it, the rest begins to follow. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes 3:1, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven." Not just as a familiar verse, not just as poetic scripture. This is a divine reassurance, a reminder that in this life, every movement, every delay, every breakthrough, and every silence has its appointed hour. And if God has assigned a time for everything, not just the things we understand, not just the blessings we see coming, but everything, then that means your waiting is never wasted. It means what you're believing for doesn't need to be rushed, because it's already being refined. God doesn't move on demand. He moves on purpose. See, we live in a world that thrives on immediacy. Quick answers, fast results, instant gratification. And it's easy to slip into that rhythm, to expect that if something hasn't happened yet, then something must be wrong. But divine timing doesn't operate according to our clocks. It runs on a higher wisdom, one that sees the whole picture when we're only holding one piece of the puzzle. God's timing isn't about convenience. It's about completion. It's not random. It's intentional. Every season has its reason, and every delay carries something sacred within it. A lesson, a preparation, a shift in you that must take place before the blessing can arrive in full. But here's where trust becomes more than just a nice word. Because when you're caught between the prayer and the promise, between the seed and the harvest, that gap can start to feel heavy. Doubt begins to creep in. You start to question not just when it will happen, but if it will happen at all. And this is where James 1:6-8 becomes vital to understand. It says, "But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord." That's not a rebuke. That's a revelation. It shows us that doubt isn't just an emotion. It's a disruption. It fractures the flow of what God is trying to bring into your life. Not because He's punishing you for feeling uncertain, but because doubt puts your spirit out of alignment with divine order. Faith is the bridge, and trust is the steady hand that holds it firm. But when you give doubt a voice, it shakes that bridge. It causes you to waver between belief and fear, between expectation and anxiety. And God, in His mercy, won't release something into unstable hands. So then, the real question becomes, can you surrender the when, even while you stand firm in the what? Can you believe that just because it hasn't happened yet, doesn't mean it's not happening at all? Because timing, chosen one, is never a sign of worth. Delay does not equal denial. Sometimes the delay is divine protection. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes it's alignment. Not just for you, but for everything and everyone connected to the blessing you're about to receive. There's a divine rhythm at play that we often can't see. While you're waiting, God is working. Orchestrating conversations, moving hearts, shifting environments, rearranging pieces that may have nothing to do with you on the surface, but everything to do with your purpose. That's what divine timing does. It goes beyond your line of sight to prepare something better than you imagined. But to experience that, you've got to stop fighting time and start flowing with it. That's the shift, from urgency to trust. Urgency comes from fear. It says, if it doesn't happen now, it may never happen. But trust speaks differently. Trust says, if it's mine, it will find me, and it will arrive exactly when I'm ready to receive it. Urgency makes you grasp. Trust allows you to rest. Urgency keeps you anxious, scattered, always measuring your progress against someone else's timeline. But trust? Trust anchors you. It calms your spirit. It frees you from comparison. It whispers, you're not late, you're being aligned. And alignment, not acceleration, is the true goal. Because getting something too soon can cost you what it was meant to bless. A blessing that arrives before you're ready can feel like a burden. But when it comes in divine timing, it fits, it flows. It feels right, not rushed. That's why God doesn't just want to answer your prayers. He wants to prepare you to carry the answer well. So what does it look like to live in this kind of trust? It looks like peace, even when nothing around you has changed. It looks like gratitude, even when the breakthrough hasn't yet arrived. It looks like showing up every day, steady, consistent, open. Not because you're trying to force the outcome, but because you know the outcome is already in process. It means you release the need to control every step and instead choose to walk in alignment with what's unfolding, even when you can't see it. It also means making space for what's on the way, not just physically, but spiritually. Are your thoughts prepared to receive what you've asked for? Is your heart positioned to steward what's coming? Because while you're waiting on God, God is also waiting on your readiness. Not perfection, but alignment. He's waiting for your heart to trust Him enough to receive without clinging, to walk forward without questioning every delay, to say, Lord, I may not know how or when, but I know who, and that's enough. This kind of trust isn't weak. It's not passive. It's powerful. Because trust, in its truest form, is an act of surrender, not a giving up, but a letting go. Letting go of control, letting go of the false timelines, letting go of the fear that says, it should have happened by now. You begin to walk differently when you truly trust divine timing. You no longer rush the process. You honor it. You no longer chase the outcome. You become it. You no longer question the season. You learn from it. And here's what happens in that space of trust. Time becomes your ally, not your enemy. You start to see delays as divine pauses, not punishments. You stop fearing stillness and start embracing what God is revealing in the quiet. Because the truth is, some of the most sacred things grow underground, in silence, in hiddenness, in time. Roots have to deepen before fruit can appear. And if God has you in a season of waiting, it's because He's strengthening your roots. That kind of growth doesn't always feel good, but it's always necessary. So let me remind you, the blessing is not late. The answer is not lost. The promise is not empty. It's all still alive. It's still unfolding. But it's coming through a process that protects both you and the promise. And the most powerful thing you can do in the meantime is to stay aligned. Stay grateful. Stay faithful. Don't let the waiting steal your worship. Don't let the silence make you doubt what God already said. Instead, Speak to the delay with confidence. Speak to the silence with assurance. Say, I trust you, God, not just for the outcome, but in the in-between. I trust that this moment has meaning, that this season has value, that even the waiting is working in my favor. That's the voice of spiritual maturity. That's the language of someone who walks with God, not just when prayers are answered, but even when they're still unfolding. And that's who you are. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're not stuck. You're being prepared. You're being aligned. You're being positioned for something that only divine timing could deliver. So take your eyes off the clock. Take your hands off the wheel. Let peace lead you. Let trust carry you. Let faith be the rhythm that grounds you. Because the moment you stop rushing, you start receiving. The moment you release control, you make room for miracles. And the moment you truly trust God's timing, not just with your lips, but with your life, that's when everything begins to align. Stay steady. Stay expectant. Your time is coming, and when it does, it will be right. It will be full. It will be beautiful. It will be on time. Now, let's take a moment and look at what holds it all together. The unseen thread that connects your prayer to your promise, your hope to your harvest, your vision to your reality. It's not talent. It's not timing. It's not even how much you want it. It's faith. Plain and simple, faith is the bridge, the divine link between the spiritual and the physical. It's what brings what is already done in the heavenly realm into manifestation in your earthly life. You know, my friend, when you ask for something in the Spirit, when you pray, when you set your heart on a God-given desire, that thing is already finished on His end. It's been spoken. It's been shaped. It's alive in the unseen. But the way it moves from that unseen world into your hands is through faith. Without faith, the blessing stays suspended. Not because it's denied, but because the bridge hasn't been built yet. Faith is what connects what God has prepared with what you are ready to receive. It doesn't pull the promise down forcefully. It opens the way, clears the channel, and allows what's already yours to flow in. But here's the thing. Real faith, the kind that manifests, is not just belief. It's not just hoping for the best. It's not just repeating words without conviction. Real faith is a living thing. It's bold. It's rooted. It stands strong even when nothing in your situation seems to agree. And most importantly, it requires no proof. That's where many get stuck. Because they're waiting to believe until they see signs. Waiting to feel certain until something shifts on the outside. But true faith doesn't operate like that. True faith holds on before the evidence shows up. It stands tall in the middle of uncertainty. It keeps speaking life even when life feels hard. It acts as though the answer has already come, because in the eyes of God, it already has. Jesus made this plain in Matthew 17:20. He said, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." Let that sink in. Not because of how poetic it sounds, but because of how true it is. Faith doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be real. It just needs to be rooted. Even a mustard seed's worth, if it's pure, if it's unwavering, can move what looks immovable. That's not symbolic. That's not figurative. That's truth. Mountains can move, but only when you believe they will, before they start to shake. Now that doesn't mean you sit back and do nothing. Faith is not passive. It's not a wait-and-see game. Faith doesn't just speak, it moves. It works. It prepares. It walks. It reaches. Because faith, by its nature, demands expression. If you believe something is coming, you live like it. You prepare for it. You open your life to receive it. That's why Scripture says in James that faith without works is dead. Not ineffective, dead. So, if you say you have faith, but you're not aligning your actions, your thoughts, your habits, your words, then what you have is not faith. What you have is a wish. And wishes don't manifest, but faith. Faith that's backed by belief, moved by vision, and partnered with obedience. That kind of faith is unstoppable. It shifts the spiritual atmosphere. It quickens the manifestation. It creates openings where there used to be walls. And here's where it gets even more powerful. Faith doesn't just create momentum, it sustains it. Because when the process gets long, when the silence stretches out, when doubt starts to knock at your door, it's faith that keeps you grounded. Faith tells you, it's still coming. Faith reminds you, the delay doesn't change the outcome. Faith whispers, just because you can't see it yet, doesn't mean it's not already yours. And that kind of internal assurance, that kind of spiritual steadiness, that's what allows you to continue building while the promise is still invisible. That's what keeps you showing up, not because of results, but because of revelation. You start living from a deeper truth. You stop waiting for signs and start being the sign. You become a walking testimony of what it means to believe before the breakthrough. This is where manifestation truly begins, not in the outer world, but in the inner one. You must first carry the reality within you before it can ever show up around you. And faith is the seed that plants that reality deep in your spirit. When it's watered with trust and anchored in obedience, it grows. It pushes through doubt. It rises above fear. It breaks through timelines and delivers results that have nothing to do with how things look, and everything to do with how aligned your spirit has become. Let's be clear. This doesn't mean life will be without trials. It doesn't mean that things will always unfold exactly the way you expect. But it does mean that no matter what comes, your faith can hold. It can anchor you through storms. It can strengthen you through silence. It can fuel you through delay. Because faith, when it's real, is not fragile. It's fierce, not loud, but unshakable. It doesn't beg God to move. It walks with God knowing He already has. And when you truly begin to live this way, something powerful happens. You stop seeing faith as something you do and start understanding it as who you are. You don't just have faith. You become faith in motion. Your life becomes a vessel for divine flow. Your decisions become acts of obedience. Your words carry weight. Your presence shifts rooms. Because when faith is alive in you, it speaks through everything you touch. That's why faith and manifestation can't be separated. You can't draw something into your life that you secretly believe you don't deserve or that might never come. You have to know it's already yours in the unseen, and then align every part of your being to that knowing. That's not pride. That's not presumption. That's divine confidence, and it's available to you right now. So ask yourself, what are you believing for? What are you praying for, hoping for, longing for? And more importantly, do your words, your actions, your mindset reflect a person who truly believes it's coming? Are you walking like it's already been released? Are you preparing like the door is already open? Because faith without alignment is incomplete. And God doesn't just respond to requests. He responds to readiness. He honors those who make room for what they've asked for, who believe without seeing, who obey without question, who trust even when there's no evidence. Because they know God is always faithful, always on time, always working in the unseen. And that's where you must remain. Not in wishful thinking, not in surface-level hope, but in unshakable faith. Let it be the foundation beneath your feet. Let it be the compass for your next step. Let it be the fuel for your preparation, the language of your prayer, and the posture of your life. You don't have to see the whole path. You just have to take the next step, believing that each move forward is bringing you closer to what's already been written. This is what manifestation looks like when faith is alive. It's not always loud. It's not always dramatic. But it is always certain. Because it's not based on how things feel. It's rooted in who God is. And that, chosen one, is the most solid ground you can stand on. So let your faith be real. Let it be visible. Let it be active. Let it be enough. Because when it is, there is nothing you cannot receive, nothing you cannot move, nothing you cannot manifest. So what about alignment? You know, my friend, the truth is, you don't attract what you want. You attract what you are, what you feel, what you embody. This isn't just a spiritual principle. It's a divine law woven into the very fabric of how the universe responds to us. Energy mirrors reality. What you emit is what you receive. If the frequency you're living in is rooted in lack, then no matter how much you pray, no matter how many times you repeat your affirmations, what comes back to you will reflect that energy. But if you begin to live from the frequency of abundance, truly embodying it, then life has no choice but to meet you there. This is what Jesus was teaching when he said in Mark 11:24, "Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." That's not poetic language. That's not hypothetical. That's alignment. That's frequency. That's divine instruction. Believe, not that it might happen, not that it could happen, not that it will happen someday. Believe that you have already received it. And when that belief becomes your inner reality, the outer world begins to respond. Let's break this down. When you dwell in the frequency of wanting, your energy is rooted in the message, "I don't have." That might be subtle, but it's loud in the spiritual realm. It sounds like lack. It feels like distance. It carries the vibration of separation from what you desire. Wanting in itself isn't wrong. It's natural. But when it becomes your state, your residence, your daily vibration, it blocks the very thing you're asking for. Because lack cannot pull in abundance. Scarcity cannot birth overflow. If your words, your emotions, your thoughts are all centered on, "I need," then what you're creating is a spiritual echo chamber that keeps reflecting that emptiness right back to you. Now here's the shift. When you step into the frequency of having, everything begins to change. That frequency says, "It's already mine." Not out of arrogance, not from a place of pretending, but from a deep inner knowing. That energy carries peace. It carries trust. It carries the vibration of wholeness. And that's the vibration where manifestation flows freely. Because the universe, created by the same God who put your desire in you, doesn't just respond to your words. It responds to your energy. When you live in the frequency of abundance, you become a magnet to everything that matches it. But this isn't just about thinking positive. This is about embodiment, full alignment. Mind, heart, body, and spirit all agreeing with what God has already promised. And that kind of alignment isn't automatic. It's intentional. It's cultivated. It's something you choose daily, moment by moment. Not through force, but through faith. And there are 3 core practices that help you sustain this frequency: gratitude, visualization, and speech. Let's start with gratitude. Gratitude is not just a reaction to good things. It's a declaration of abundance before the evidence appears. It's the language of faith in motion. When you wake up and say, "Thank you, God, for what's already unfolding," even before it shows up. That's alignment. That's vibration. That's you matching the energy of having. Gratitude shifts the atmosphere. It shifts your inner world. And when you live from gratitude, you begin to see more to be grateful for. Not because things suddenly change, but because you have changed. Your perception elevates, your spirit expands, and your life begins to reflect that expansion. Next comes visualization. Now hear this, not as wishful daydreaming, but as spiritual participation. When you visualize, you are stepping into the realm of already having. You're giving your subconscious a new blueprint to follow. You're telling your mind, "This is who I am. This is what belongs to me. This is the life I'm walking into." And when you feel it, not just see it, but feel the joy, the peace, the fulfillment of that vision, that feeling becomes your new frequency. You begin to move as if it's already done, and that movement, that energy, draws the manifestation toward you. But visualization must be paired with speech, because your words are carriers of energy. Every time you speak, you're either affirming abundance or reinforcing lack. That's why your language matters. You can't talk about lack and expect overflow. You can't keep saying, "I hope one day," or "maybe it's not for me," and expect to live in the frequency of already having. Your speech must align with your vision. Speak from the place of fulfillment. Say, "It's on the way. I'm walking in it. I'm ready." Not because you're trying to convince yourself, but because you've chosen to agree with heaven's timeline, not your own. Now let's go deeper. This alignment isn't just about what you say and feel when you're praying or meditating. It's about how you carry yourself in the ordinary moments. In conversations, in silence, in difficulty. Do you speak like someone who is already blessed? Do you move like someone who expects favor? Do you respond like someone who trusts that everything is unfolding in divine order? That's the real test of alignment. It's not just a moment of high energy, it's a way of life. This is what living in the frequency of abundance looks like. It's not about ignoring reality. It's about redefining what's real to you. Faith says, "I walk by truth, not by sight." And the truth is, what God has for you is not a matter of if, but when. But that when is often determined by your alignment. The more you dwell in the vibration of already having, the more the timing begins to accelerate. Not because God changed his mind, but because you came into agreement. And agreement is everything. When you agree with lack, you delay your blessing. But when you agree with abundance, not just mentally, but energetically, you open the door. You make space. You send a clear signal that you're ready. And that readiness isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It's steady, quiet, confident. It doesn't chase. It draws. Because abundance doesn't rush. It rests in the knowing. And in that rest, you find clarity. You stop grasping. You stop begging. You stop questioning your worth. You begin to feel peace, not because everything looks perfect, but because you know the alignment is enough. That's when opportunities start to find you. That's when people show up with what you need. That's when doors open effortlessly, not because you forced them, but because your frequency opened them first. This is why it's so important to check your emotional tone. Ask yourself, what am I vibrating right now? Is it fear? Is it doubt? Is it frustration? Or is it confidence? Is it gratitude? Is it peace? Because your emotions are powerful indicators of your alignment. If you're constantly anxious, constantly worried, constantly speaking from scarcity, then your frequency is off. But when you begin to shift those feelings, when you catch them and consciously redirect them toward joy, even in small doses, you begin to raise your vibration. And every little shift matters. Every small act of gratitude, every quiet moment of visualization, every intentional word, it all adds up. It compounds. It builds momentum. And soon, the world around you starts to shift in response. But here's the truth. This isn't a one-time decision. This is a daily posture, a lifestyle, a spiritual commitment to remain aligned even when circumstances try to pull you out of sync, even when the evidence is missing, even when doubt knocks. That's when alignment matters most. Not when everything feels easy, but when everything in the natural tries to convince you otherwise. That's when your frequency becomes a declaration. I still believe. I'm still aligned. It's still mine. Because the moment you slip back into lack, you begin to block the flow. But when you hold steady, when you remain in the energy of having, you keep the channel open. And that's where the blessing flows. That's where favor multiplies. That's where the impossible becomes possible. Not through striving, but through alignment. So let your life speak the language of abundance. Let your energy say what your words sometimes can't. Let your inner world become the birthplace of the outer reality. And above all, stay consistent. Not perfect, just consistent. That consistency of vibration will do more for your manifestation than 1,000 rushed prayers spoken from fear. You're not chasing anything. You're aligning. You're not begging for blessings. You're living in the vibration that welcomes them. You're not hoping something will show up. You're embodying the truth that it already has. And when you do that, when you live there, when you rest there, everything you've been believing for starts to show up. Not by force, not by accident, but by frequency. There comes a point in every journey of faith where you must face a quiet but powerful truth. Not everything that delays your blessing comes from the outside. Sometimes the greatest obstacle to your breakthrough is not the situation. It's the resistance that lives within. That resistance may wear many faces: fear, control, anxiety, doubt. But at its core, it is a refusal to let go. And nothing delays manifestation more than a heart that still tries to hold the reins. Resistance is subtle. It disguises itself as being responsible, prepared, or even faithful. But what it really reveals is an unwillingness to surrender. It's a need to know every step, to predict every outcome, to hold tight to how things should unfold, instead of trusting that God already has it worked out. And until you release that resistance, until you surrender the need to control the how, the when, and the way, what you've been believing for will remain just out of reach, not because you're not worthy of it, not because God hasn't prepared it, but because resistance creates spiritual friction. It disrupts the flow. Surrender, on the other hand, creates space. It clears the way. It tells God, I don't need to know how you're going to do it. I just need to trust that you will. That's not weakness. That's not giving up. That's power in its purest form. Power wrapped in humility. Because it takes strength to stop striving. It takes spiritual maturity to release what you can't control and rest in divine timing. Look at Scripture. In Genesis 16, Sarah couldn't see how God would fulfill his promise. The years passed, her body aged, her hope wore thin, and so, instead of waiting, she took matters into her own hands. She gave Hagar to Abraham, believing that perhaps this was the way. But what began as a shortcut turned into a complication. Jealousy, conflict, pain. That's what happens when resistance leads you to force something before it's time. When we try to manufacture outcomes, we may get results, but not the kind of peace-filled, purpose-aligned results that come from God's hand. Sarah's story reminds us that rushing divine timing comes at a cost. It teaches us that the moment we stop trusting and start taking control, we invite chaos into what was meant to be sacred. And that same principle applies to us today. When we cling too tightly to the outcome, when we obsess over timing, when we try to engineer the details of the promise, we create resistance. And that resistance blocks what God is trying to flow into our lives. So what's the remedy? Surrender. Surrender is not the absence of desire. It's the release of control. It's the act of saying, God, I trust you more than I trust my own timeline. It's detaching from the how and the when, not because those things don't matter, but because you know that holding on to them too tightly will only lead to frustration. Surrender says, I am still expectant, but I am no longer anxious. That's the shift that opens the floodgates. But how do you get there? How do you practice surrender in a world that teaches you to hustle, to plan, to push? You begin with detachment. Now understand this. Detachment is not giving up. It's not apathy. Detachment is the spiritual art of remaining connected to your desire without being consumed by it. It's when you can say, I would love for this to come to pass, but I trust that if it doesn't happen exactly how I imagined, something better is being worked out. That kind of openness allows God to move freely. It takes the limits off your vision and gives the Creator space to create. Because when you release the outcome, you allow the outcome to become bigger than your limited understanding. Detachment frees you from fear. It dissolves the need to manipulate the process. And in that space, peace settles in. You begin to feel lighter. You stop obsessing. You stop checking for signs every 5 minutes. You stop wondering, why hasn't it happened yet? And start resting in, I know it's already unfolding. That's not denial. That's divine alignment. To cultivate this state, you need spiritual tools, daily practices that help quiet the noise and align your inner world with the rhythm of trust. Meditation is one of those tools. Meditation is not about escaping reality. It's about returning to it, centered and clear. It allows you to step out of the whirlwind of thought and into the presence of peace. Just a few moments of stillness each day, focused on breath, on presence, on divine connection, that can begin to untangle the knots of resistance. It trains your mind to release. It softens your grip on control, and it opens your heart to receive. Trust is another tool, but it's not just a feeling, it's a daily choice. Trust says, even though I don't see it, I believe it's being handled. Trust doesn't need proof. It doesn't wait for confirmation. It rests in the character of the one who made the promise. And here's the truth. When you really trust God, you don't have to monitor the process. You don't have to constantly ask, is it working? You know that it is, even in silence, even in stillness, even in delay. And finally, you must practice emotional detachment from outcomes. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop fearing. When you are emotionally attached to a specific result, you create pressure. That pressure becomes resistance. It clouds your judgment. It distorts your peace. But when you let go, when you decide that your joy, your wholeness, your identity are not tied to any one outcome, you step into freedom. You begin to walk in the kind of emotional resilience that says, no matter what happens, I remain whole, I remain blessed, I remain aligned. This is what it means to release resistance. It means letting go of what you thought it had to look like, so God can show you what it was always meant to be. It means making peace with divine timing. It means learning to flow with life, not fight against it. Because your blessing is not fragile. It's not easily lost. It's not one mistake away from disappearing. If God prepared it, it's anchored in grace. And that grace cannot be undone by your past, your doubt, or even your delay. But grace works best in surrendered hands. It flows where there is space. And that space is created when resistance is released. So take a deep breath, chosen one. Let go of the tension in your spirit. Release the pressure you've been carrying. Surrender your timeline. Lay down your need to know every detail. And trust, deeply, fully, unshakably, that what is meant for you is not passing you by. It is being prepared, refined, and aligned with your highest good. And the more you let go, the faster it flows. You don't have to chase. You don't have to control. You don't have to force anything into place. Your only task now is to stay open, stay grounded, and stay in tune with the flow of divine guidance. Let the unfolding happen without your interference. Let the manifestation come to you, not because you made it happen, but because you allowed it. Resistance will whisper, you have to do more. You have to hold on tighter. But surrender speaks a higher truth. Be still and know. So rest in that knowing. Let it hold you. Let it lead you. Let it free you. Because once resistance is gone, once you stop blocking the blessing with your fear and your need for control, the way is clear. And everything that's been waiting for you can finally find its way home. Pause for a moment and ask a question that doesn't just move the mind, but calls the soul to attention. What would it look like if you truly lived? Not just thought, not just hoped, but fully lived. As though what you've been praying for is already yours. Not in pretense, not in denial, but in sacred embodiment. That's the call right now. Not to try harder, not to push further, but to step fully into the state of having. Because there's a difference between thinking about a blessing and becoming the space for it to dwell. It's one thing to want peace. It's another to carry yourself as peace. It's one thing to pray for abundance. It's another to live like you are already aligned with it. This isn't about fantasy or delusion. It's about alignment, spiritual alignment. Because the truth is, when you shift from desiring something to being the person who already has it, the world begins to respond differently. Doors that once seemed closed start to open, not because the world changed, but because you did. This way of living, it's not theoretical. It's a posture, a rhythm, a daily spiritual stance. And it starts by remembering this. Your external reality is not the proof of your internal truth. What you see around you may still reflect lack, but that doesn't mean lack lives within you. And when you stop letting the outside define your faith, you begin to access a different level of spiritual power. You begin to live from the inside out. And that's where real manifestation flows, not from control, not from striving, but from internal abundance that radiates outward. You may be walking through a situation that doesn't look like fulfillment. The numbers may not add up. The circumstances may still feel incomplete. But when your spirit is full, when your heart is certain, when your mind is set on truth, you begin to walk like someone who already holds the answer. You speak with peace. You move with confidence. You operate with grace. That's the energy of having. And when you truly embody it, fully and faithfully, you become a mirror for the blessing to reflect itself back to you. This is co-creation. This is what it means to walk in step with God. To align not just your words, but your identity with the truth of what He's already declared. God doesn't move just because we're desperate. He moves when we're ready. And readiness isn't about physical preparation. It's spiritual alignment. It's when your thoughts, your emotions, your energy, your expectations are all tuned to the same frequency as your promise. And that's not just a nice idea. That's scripture. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." That's not circumstantial. That's foundational. It means that even the pieces that feel out of place, even the delays, even the detours, they are working for your good. That's not wishful thinking. That's the eternal nature of divine design. And when you trust that, truly trust it, you stop living from fear. You stop bracing for disappointment. You begin to carry an inner knowing that says, even this is working for me. That kind of trust begins to change how you see yourself. Because the moment you step into the state of having, your identity must rise to meet it. You can no longer see yourself as someone who is endlessly seeking. You become the one who is receiving, not chasing, not begging, not doubting, receiving. There's a shift that happens when you stop identifying with the lack and begin identifying with the fulfillment. When you stop defining yourself by what you don't yet have and start defining yourself by what God has already spoken over your life. You move from being a seeker to becoming a steward, from striving to flowing, from wondering to knowing. And in that knowing, you begin to build not from pressure, but from peace. That's where abundance lives. That's where divine clarity begins to flow. And that's where you become magnetic. Not because of what you're doing, but because of who you're being. Now hear this clearly. The state of having is not about proving anything to the world. It's not about status. It's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about walking in spiritual authority, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that walks quietly, calmly, steadily in truth. Because when you're in alignment, you don't need to convince anyone. You just are. You're present. You're open. You're at peace. And peace, beloved, is the real marker of abundance. Not just money, not just status, not just possessions. Peace is what tells you, I'm already held, I'm already full, I'm already covered. You start seeing everything differently. You stop comparing your path to others because you're no longer driven by lack. You stop chasing timelines because you're rooted in divine flow. That's what happens when joy and gratitude become your default state. Not just emotions you visit, but the home your spirit lives in. Gratitude multiplies abundance, not because it changes God's mind, but because it changes yours. When you're grateful, you see more. When you see more, you receive more. Not because anything external shifted, but because your awareness expanded. And that awareness becomes a magnet. It draws more reasons to be grateful. It opens your eyes to what's already available. Gratitude turns what you have into more than enough. It lifts your energy. It sharpens your vision. It reminds you that you're already in the blessing. You're just watching it unfold piece by piece. This is where comparison begins to die. Because when you're truly in the state of having, someone else's success doesn't feel like your failure. Their blessing doesn't feel like your delay. You're no longer measuring your life against someone else's moment. You're flowing in your own divine timeline, and that flow, that peace, that quiet confidence, it makes you unshakable. You no longer need to rush. You no longer need to prove. You just trust, and you keep walking. And here's the beautiful part. When you live in the state of having, life becomes lighter. You stop micromanaging your future. You stop overanalyzing the signs. You stop asking, when will it happen? And start saying, it's already unfolding. That shift in language reflects a deeper shift in spirit. It's no longer about external control. It's about internal trust. That trust becomes the soil where abundance grows. And from that soil, you begin to plant new habits. Habits of speaking life. Habits of feeling full. Habits of choosing joy even when it would be easier to choose fear. And each time you choose alignment over anxiety, each time you choose gratitude over grasping, you reinforce the state of having, not as something you're hoping to reach, but as something you've already entered. And don't be surprised if your external reality takes a little time to catch up. That's not a sign of failure. That's the nature of spiritual law. Manifestation often has a lag, not because it's resisting you, but because the world is still rearranging itself to match your new identity. That's why it's so important to stay steady. Don't waver just because the results aren't instant. Keep living like it's done. Keep showing up like it's already yours. That consistency of embodiment is what draws the unseen into the seen. And when it arrives, and it will, it won't feel foreign. It will feel like home, because you've already been living with it in your spirit. You've already made space for it in your heart. That's what it means to walk by faith and not by sight. You don't wait for the blessing to feel blessed. You don't wait for the outcome to feel fulfilled. You live now, fully, joyfully, gratefully, as if the promise has already been fulfilled. And that life, that energy, that posture, that's what attracts everything you were meant to receive. You are not becoming the version of you that has the blessing. You already are that version. Now is the time to live like it. with confidence, with peace, with joy, with full embodiment. Not because you're forcing anything, but because you're finally aligned. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is working. Not because you figured it all out, but because you've surrendered what you don't need to carry. You've stepped into the state of having. And now, everything that's been waiting for you is free to find its way home. We have come this far, and now, my dear friend, take a deep breath. Settle into this moment, not just with your body, but with your spirit. Let everything fall away, the striving, the questioning, the old fears. Because here's the truth you were always meant to remember. You are already abundant. You're not waiting to become worthy. You're not on some endless path trying to earn what has already been freely given. You are not incomplete. You are not missing anything. You are whole, chosen, and deeply held by the one who shaped you. There is no more chasing, no more running after validation, no more measuring yourself by timelines, achievements, or outcomes. You've come too far, grown too deep, and surrendered too much to go back to that old rhythm of lack. That was never your home. And now, you are being called to live as someone who knows that the well doesn't run dry, knows that you are not separate from the blessing, knows that everything you need is not outside of you, it's within. Waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be claimed. You don't have to grasp anymore. You don't have to force what was always meant to flow. The blessings of God do not arrive by manipulation or fear. They come gently, powerfully, and precisely through alignment, through trust, through the quiet confidence of a heart that says, I know who I am, and I know whose I am. That is abundance, and it's not something you arrive at. It's something you remember. Because the truth is, you were never lacking, never less than, never forgotten. The delays were never denials. The silence was not rejection. It was preparation, refinement, a holy invitation to release the weight of performance and return to rest. Not the kind of rest that gives up, but the kind that stands firm, anchored in the deep knowing that you don't need to chase what God has already assigned to you. You were formed in abundance, called by name, covered in grace. And every time you doubted it, every time you wondered if you had to be more, do more, prove more, grace was still holding you, reminding you, whispering gently, you are already enough. Not because of what you have, but because of who you are. And the moment you start to live from that truth, not just speak it, but embody it, you stop searching for evidence outside of yourself. You start to see that everything was already working in your favor. This is where you are now, not on the outside looking in, but standing in the center of divine flow. That flow is not rushed. It's not chaotic. It's ordered, steady, sacred. And it carries every answer, every provision, every opening you've been praying for. Your task now is not to speed it up, not to engineer it, but to stay in it. Stay in the current. Stay in the posture of trust. Let the Spirit lead. Let the unfolding continue without interference. Because there's a peace that comes when you stop asking, how will it happen? And start declaring, it's already happening. That peace doesn't mean life will never challenge you again, but it does mean that challenge no longer has the final say. It means that even in the waiting, you know you are not without. Even in the stillness, you know something holy is moving beneath the surface. So hold this truth close. You are already abundant. You don't need to hustle for grace. You don't need to compete for favor. You don't need to climb ladders to reach what was already placed in your path. Everything is unfolding as it should. Not always on your schedule, but always on time. Let this be your affirmation now. I lack nothing. I need not chase. I live in the flow. I trust the timing. I receive the fullness. Let your days begin with that truth. Let your prayers rise from that foundation. Let your energy speak it before your mouth does. And when doubt comes, and it will, meet it with remembrance. Come back to the center. Return to the place where striving ends and receiving begins. This is not a finish line. This is a beginning, a sacred return to who you've always been beneath the noise. Someone deeply loved, someone abundantly equipped, someone perfectly positioned for the life God has already called into existence. So walk forward, not with urgency, but with presence, not with fear, but with faith, not with pressure, but with peace. Because the truth is settled, and from this place, beloved, from this frequency, abundance can do what it was always meant to do. Not prove your worth, but reflect it, because you already are worthy, whole, chosen, abundant. Now walk in that truth and let the rest unfold exactly as it was always meant to. We have reached the end of today's message together. Thank you for spending this time with me. Truly, it means more than words can express. Whether you've been walking with this message from the beginning, or you just found your way here today, I want you to know this. Your presence matters. Your spirit matters. And the journey you're on, it's sacred. I pray that every word spoken here has stirred something deeper in you, something true, something alive, something you're ready to carry forward into your life. May you walk in peace. May you walk in confidence. And above all, may you never forget that abundance is not a destination. It is who you already are. You were made for overflow. You were made to rise, to trust, to receive. So keep walking, keep flowing, keep becoming. If this message spoke to you, if something in it resonated with your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what landed with you, what you're reflecting on, or how you're stepping into alignment. And if you feel led, share this with someone else who needs to hear it. Let's keep spreading this light. Let's keep lifting each other higher. And this isn't the end. It's just the next step. I'll see you in the next message, the next moment, the next sacred pause we share together. Until then, stay rooted, stay open, and stay in flow. You are already abundant, and the best is yet to come.